Alrighty. Standard problems and fixes needed for the 3-year rotation by Power Dragon. Let's take a look here.
So,
Oh, come on.
I want to talk to y'all about something. Like, I've been really thinking.
Hold on. Go back.
So,
All right. That's a smooth intro. I like the production design and then the walking up front. I like that. I don't know. It's just little things like that.
I want to talk to y'all about something. Like,
Okay.
I've been really thinking about this whole standard 3-year rotation thing and the good and the bad. And I talked about it a little bit before, and I'll try to remember to link a video here. But the thing is, I don't think the problem is necessarily what they outlined. I think it's actually something altogether different. Now, there was a period of time where creatures were actually coming into their own, and it was kind of exciting. And we saw a bunch of different creature decks and theme decks, and that was neat. But then there were some complaints that removal wasn't good enough, and the control decks couldn't survive, and, that whole thing. And over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, they've done a pretty good job of.
I would say that control decks. Well, okay, so let's kind of turn the gears back a little bit. My standard experience kind of goes back to the original Innistrad, and my experience of playing standard from Innistrad till today is that control comes and goes in waves of prevalence. My favorite form of control is when it's more mid-range control, kind of Orzhov. The last time that it was like that I really enjoyed was when I was playing Eldrazi's. Black-white Eldrazi's, and I was like, the top of the curve was like the 6-drop Sorin. I can't even remember what it was called. But, lately, for as far as control goes, the flavor of control that's been played, I like more than the flavor of control that was played a decade ago with Sphinx's Revelation and the Supreme Verdict. I'd rather play Shark Typhoon and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria today. I think control is much more fun to play in general. When you got cards like the Wandering Emperor or Settle the Wreckage, it's just a much better experience, especially the direction that creature decks have gone and the designs of creatures have just become staple X amount of keywords and then copy paste random sentences from different paragraphs to make this card good in this specific situation. That's kind of a whole other conversation though.
Of making removal better. The problem is, removal may have just gotten too good. And I know that sounds a little crazy, and I'm not saying that there should.
Yeah, to a certain extent, when you get cards like, what is that Infernal Grasp, the one that it's like 1 in a black, destroy target creature, you lose X amount of life, I feel like that's kind of reaching a new precedent of what a playable removal spell is for black, because for the longest time the standard was Hero's Downfall as like kind of your more mid-rangey option, and then like Fatal Push as like your efficient option. But nowadays, now that you can play cards like Infernal Grasp, where it's just kind of like generically good, kind of like a Path to Exile was 10 years ago and still is to today, or sorry, not Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares. I'd say Swords to Plowshares and Infernal Grasp are very similar cards in terms of design aesthetics, and in terms of what the cards do, they're almost kind of polar opposites in what their colors represent. And the thing is that Swords to Plowshares was so early in the game that, I think it's also kind of part of the reason why creatures were such dog shit back then. It's just they were just bad in general. And if you got a good one out, it was going to get swords anyways. So that was kind of the problem that white had for the longest time. But I feel like black is now, there are too many good black generic cards. There are just too many good generic cards in general. But especially black has just been eating good for like the last 3 to 4 years. A lot of people have been talking about, like red, for example, or green. But I think black has just, under the radar, just really gotten a lot of the best stuff. And it might be to its detriment.
Could be no removal, and let me just be clear here, actually, because I know there's going to be a bunch of people that race to the comments, but I'm not saying we shouldn't have control decks. And a matter of fact, I think we should have control decks as much as we should have theme decks.
It's absolutely necessary. You have to have it.
And aggro and burn decks. The bigger variety of decks you can play in standard, the better.
Absolutely.
However, the cards we have right now already are full of value, where you're talking about something like
There really
Invoke
are.
Despair that allows black to do some really insane things.
Too good.
And
Way too
obviously
good.
Fable of the Mirror Breaker, that
Way
pretty
too
much
good.
is always going to be like a
It's
2.5
generically good.
to 1.
Fable is generically good. I liked the card at first because I was like, ooh, this is actually, it does a lot. And then everyone kind of realized, oh, this is just kind of like the best red 3-drop that's ever been printed. And for kind of the wrong reasons. You know, I like more of a Bone Crusher Giant as my 3-drop, but Fable of the Mirror Breaker was a mistake.
Card every single time. Like, just the value in some of these cards is too good. But let's talk about the removal specifically. The announcement for the 3-year standard made it sound like they wanted to allow themes to cross-pollinate a little bit, and that was what was holding back the creature deck.
A lot of the problem with the themes cross-pollinating isn't necessarily the removal suite or the generically broken cards that's available. It's the fact that you only got 2 sets with Toxic. And if you really want to be pedantic, it's kind of like 1.5 set with Toxic. Whereas you didn't really get like a whole block's worth to explore that mechanic. And that problem extended with Innistrad. Even though it had 2 sets, it felt like it was still 2 different shades of Innistrad that beyond the day-bound, night-bound kind of thing, I don't know. But we just don't get enough time to develop into the mechanics, which is why you have sort of these weird vehicles in Streets of New Campetta, when it could have just been better if it was retrofitted as part of Kamigawa and you just had a second Kamigawa set instead of Streets of New Campetta, but it is what it is.
But no, I don't think that's it. I think it's actually all of these different sweepers and things. So let's look at the first one with Path of Peril, right? This is only 3 mana.
Cleave is such an ugly design. Cleave is just garbage to look at.
But then we have stuff like Depopulate. Depopulate is at least somewhat fair because you have time to prep for it and it only destroys.
And you get to draw a card.
So that's great. And you might even get a card, but it is only 4 mana. But then we also have stuff like Sunfall. This is kind of crazy.
I predict after this ban wave that's going to be coming in a few days that Sunfall is going to probably be the most played card in Standard if I had to take a guess.
Because now it just exiles everything. But wait, there's more. They also get a token creature for their trouble, which is probably going to be like a 3/3 to a 5/5.
Maybe it's a bit much for me to say it's the most played card.
Farewell.
I want it to be the most
reason,
played card.
It should just be set up to where you choose 2 maybe, but you can just choose everything, and that just keeps any type of fun theme deck or creative
just
multi-part
wipe the
Rube
fucking
Goldberg
slate
machine
clean
type deck from doing anything because it just
such an
exiles them.
unproductive card.
All of them. It's crazy,
All of
except for Planeswalkers. Which, speaking of, we got that new Wandering Emperor, whatever her name is. Like,
that
she
card
can
is
just wipe out
good.
your whole board and leave you.
That
with
card
one
is
token.
really good.
Oh, and don't forget, there's still Vanquish the Horde, which
That card is also severely, at least, I don't know. Maybe my perspective is only insular to what I've obviously kind of seen, but man, it feels like Vanquish the Horde is just so under the radar. Maybe it's just me. It's probably just me.
That much played, but it can be played kind of cheaply if there's a bunch of creatures. And then there's the White Sun's Twilight, which, yeah, it only destroys, but your opponent gets a pile of little mites that are just going to poison you out in a turn or 2, and they get to gain life. So whatever you did to get ahead was not going to matter. It gets 3 things out of that. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
oh, and then there's like, by invitation only, that pops up every once in a while that makes you sacrifice things. Oh, and then there's the new battle that is basically destroys all creatures. Invasion of Fiora or whatever, I think.
This many sweepers, and granted, it's a lot of different flavors of what a sweeper is. Besides Invasion of Fiora just essentially being a 6-mana Crux of Fate. Which, whatever. But, there's just too many sweepers in general. Digging back into the past of Magic and thinking about, like Casualties of War and Settle the Wreckage and Supreme Verdict and, oh god, even other random ones like Planar Outburst or End Hostilities or Merciless Eviction or just random stuff like that. A lot of that was peppered into, or they were just intermingled with each other, but not to the extent where it's this. The problem with this 3-year standard is that we are essentially seeing an extended level option, like extended as in the format that used to exist a long fucking time ago, that level of multiple options of what you can do with sweepers. But the problem is that it's been focused into such a small period of time that it really kind of amplifies the problem with not having a decent block structure, and you just get way too many of shit like this, because each time you go to a new block or you're trying to essentially tell a new story every block, you have to have frames of reference. And in order to do that, you kind of have to have more generic destroy cards or board wipe cards like what we're seeing here. And that's a large problem that we've had post Eldraine, I would say.
Like that one. Oh, and then there's still Burn Down the House, Brotherhood's End, Gix's Command, Portal to Phyrexia, Temporary Lockdown, and then a whole host of bad ones like Vampire's Vengeance and Incandescent Aria. There's like 6 or 7 of those. And there's Elder Dragon War, Malicious Malfunction, Structural Assault. So many sweepers. A ton. Why?
Way too many.
It seems like we get a new one every...
It's probably for limited, honestly. In actuality, you're not gonna have the block structure where you're not gonna have a pack of Innistrad and 2 packs of Dark Ascension, for example, right? You're gonna have 3 packs of Kamigawa, and then you're gonna have 3 packs of Streets of New Capenna, and you're gonna have 3 packs of Brothers War, 3 packs of Dominaria United, and each time you have these draft formats, they have to hit certain things, and they have to hit certain things often enough to where it creates a fun environment for limited players. I speak with absolutely no experience in limited. I don't play limited, but if I had to take a guess why there's too many sweepers, it is specifically because of limited. Specifically. That's just my uneducated guess, though.
Like, think about this. If we go into a 3-year rotation and there's always another quality sweeper, we're going to have 12 quality sweepers every rotation. That's not going to encourage people to play creatures. Now, if we got...
It is going to just make creatures better in the worst way, and it's going to speed up the amount of paragraphs and amount of instances of seeing cards like Indestructible and Hexproof and Ward more. That's what you're going to see. And as a result, the spot removal is just going to have to get better. The card advantage cards are going to have to get better. You're going to see more expressive iteration type cards along with your D-Sparks and stuff like that. That's going to be the problem.
Got one every 3rd set or something, so there's always like at least 2 quality ones in rotation or whatever. That would be fine. I don't think we'd have an issue with it. Like right now, there's like 16 to 18 reasonable sweepers that you can run into, even if you're just playing standard with the limited number of sets that are available.
Way too many.
We're only going to add to that over the next year before we get to rotation. But it's not even just sweepers. Let's talk about the spot removal, because here comes another problem. That creatures don't really matter if they have hexproof anymore, or indestructible for that matter.
It's this weird circle of life, right? The first 10 to 20 years of Magic, creatures fucking sucked. Okay, not good. It's why old school Commander from 10 years ago was a great experience, because you had a select handful of obviously good creatures, and then you had a sea of just mid to garbage, and you had great non-creature spells and enchantments, a few planeswalkers, but for the most part, people were just playing spells or enchantments or artifacts, and the same kind of staple of the same core creature packages. But then a lot of the part of the fun of Commander was is people would just try these weird combinations of awful creatures. Anyways, we're going back to full circle here, where the first 10, 15, 20 years of creatures were bad. Then for the last 10 years, they've just been getting better and better, to the point where the non-creature spells have had to counteract the creatures. And now we're in this weird spot where a lot of the creatures read really well, like comparatively to old school cards. Like honestly, you open up a pack of Magic the Gathering cards right now, you take a look at the common creatures, and you don't tell me that those are bad cards for the most part. I'd say there's a good 80% chance that the card is okay or playable or decent. Whereas this was not the same 5 to 10 years ago. You go back to Amonkhet, you'd say about 50% of the creatures are okay or playable. You turn the tides back, or you turn the clock back to Return to Ravnica, you'd say maybe about 40% of these creatures are good or playable. And the problem is that now we're reaching a point where a lot of these creatures are so playable and so good, but the removal is also so playable and so good that it counteracts the actual potential that creatures have in Standard. And it's a big problem why I don't really want to play Standard, is because the reason why I like playing Modern is because I play Burn, and Burn is Burn. Whereas if you play a generic creature deck in Modern, you have to worry about Fury or Solitude. Or if people are going to play Path to Exile or anything like that, it's just kind of the big problem is that while creatures are generically better than they used to be, the removal has outclassed it significantly to the point where I don't know if it's bad. It's change. Obviously, it's change, but if it's really that bad, I feel like it would have been more apparent, or widely apparent sooner. It seems apparent now because we're kind of focusing more on the issue and I'm thinking about it more. But maybe it's just not really that bad, but a large part of the problem is that my eyes just kind of get glazed over with all these generically good creatures. And the problem is that 10 years ago, I would look at a paragraph, not pay attention to it, because a lot of the times the paragraph justifies that this really cool fact is being held back by this really dog shit effect. Is now there's so much good stuff on this card that every card kind of reads like the questing beast. Anyways.
Like, yeah, they stop one thing or the other, but when a deck is full of tons of things that just exile in some way, shape, or form, those things don't really matter all that much anymore.
Yep.
Just off the top of my head, we have, like, Ossification, that shows up pretty much everywhere. That exiles. We have Lay Down Arms, and that exiles. Shieldred's Edict. We have the Wandering Emperor. Like, you kind of see a pattern here, right? And then the things that don't just make you exile are just full of extra value because they're super cheap that keep those early creatures from even getting established. So you get stuff like Cut Down or Go for the Throat. It's really, really hard to want to play an aggro deck. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not impossible, but it's not a fun experience. And yes, it's Magic. It shouldn't be easy. But when you go through stretches where I've watched some people play games where they just can't get a creature to stick, or you're playing a bunch of very linear creatures that have extra all these things attached.
At that point, why even play a creature deck? Just play Control or Combo. If you're going to play an aggro deck, you're going to get hit by sweepers and efficient removal in the first few turns anyways. So a lot of aggro players will just end up playing a mid-range deck, but the mid-range creatures can't keep up with the removal and all the sweepers, so why not just play a mid-rangey Control or hard Control or Combo? Like, that's just kind of the direction we're getting pushed in. Kind of reminds me of Yu-Gi-Oh, if I'm being honest, which, I mean, not to disparage Yu-Gi-Oh, but I don't want Magic to go in the direction of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Attached to it, and you're having to play like Tyvar Stand or whatever, that's tough because some of the time your Tyvar stands don't even matter, right? Like, how many times have you had a Tyvar stand or a Tameo Safekeeping and then your opponent just plays a Sunfall? That happens.
Yep.
Or you're just not playing stuff to the board because your opponent can just farewell, right? And just wipe your whole board away. Or play a Planeswalker and get rid of your whole board. Like, that's the problem here. And again, let me be clear. I'm not saying that any of these shouldn't exist. I'm just saying we need more balance to the force, if you will. Standard as a whole, yes, people have to invest in cards and they rotate. 3 years, I think, is good. It gives people...
This problem might be solved 2 to 3 years down the line if they maintain this rotation of extending Standard to being 3 years. We're dealing with the problems now of too much removal in the format, but if I had to take a guess, they already recognized this problem a long time ago, and then they've already started to develop for future standards like this, because it seems to me that Wizards is very proud of the standard format that they have created, and they're very proud of what they're making, and they're not going to want to really continue what they're doing right now, at least in terms of ruining the playability of creatures. Now, they probably have different data on MTG Arena than our collective experience has, so maybe they just know something that we don't. But for the most part, I think that I would like to hope that they have an understanding that this is a problem, that they have already mitigated these problems for future standard, which we will see 2 to 3 years from now.
Chance to use all those cards they spent money on, and some of them will hold value longer. All great things. The problem is people are not going to want to play if you're either playing mid-range value or control, because that's kind of all that you can do on a super competitive level. Now you're playing on the ladder, things change and open up a little bit. Me and other creators, we're playing a bunch of stuff, that's cool. But if you want people to go back to stores to play paper and make an investment, that's what has to change.
Timmy's like to play creatures. Newer players, casual players, people that don't really want to devote all of their brain power into thinking 5 turns ahead, want to play the best, cheapest, efficient, most hard-hitting creatures, or the theme of what they like. Ooh, they like vampires, or ooh, they like werewolves, or what the fuck ever. Maybe they want to play mechs. But casual players like playing creatures. Most Magic players like playing creatures, but the casual players specifically do not want to devote their board state and get fucking sunfalled every single game. That's a great way to send them right back to the kitchen table.
Because players on the ladder, like, we're kind of playing for free, or at least playing with some house money and some value or whatever. That's a whole different ball game. When somebody has to go invest in a deck that's going to be anywhere between $50 and maybe $300, they're only going to play the ones that have all the value cards and all the ridiculousness for exiling, sweeping, whatever. And if they don't,
yeah, for the most part,
probably going to have lower odds. You need things to be more balanced. And right now, I think the only way we fix that is either we have to ban a bunch of things, or over the next couple of sets, creatures have to be absurd. I think one of the other things that's an issue is
they're already absurd. Creatures have been absurd for a long time. They just, on average, creatures have just been too good to the point where it's hard to even care about creatures anymore. It's the problem of, oh God, what is that? The Incredibles. If everybody's a superhero, nobody is. Okay, if everybody's a questing beast, then I might as well just read a book when it comes to intaking all of this text all at once.
When you think about designing creatures from the perspective of R&D, because what do creatures end up needing to do or have to be able to circumvent some of this, right? Because even being able to play out of the graveyard or whatever does you no good if the card is exiled in some way anyway. But we don't want to do what we did last time with Eldraine. That went poorly. So I don't know what the best situation is here.
True.
For me, I'd be voting on banning some of these cards and at least trying to balance things out. I have an idea of which ones. I don't know. Maybe I'll save that for another video.
Same. This is a pretty decent video. You know, I really... seems very insightful, and he seems very smart. You know, him and I agree on a lot of stuff. Anyways, yeah, so this is Power Dragon. Check him out. I'm going to put his video in the description down below. And anyways, my name is Tasty Snackies. You all been wonderful, and I'll catch you on the flip side.